President Uhuru Kenyatta has been sustained and will be sworn in next week. So we'll begin to touch a lot of these issues, particularly on Zimbabwe. We'll come to Kenya, and then we'll also talk a bit about Togo. We have right here in the studio a security expert, IBRAHIM, who always joins us when we want to discuss matters of security. Thank you very much for gracing our studios this morning. You look very good.
Oh, you look better.
Right, thank you very much. So, to start with, we want to analyze particularly the security issues as we will be expecting in the weeks ahead of us in Zimbabwe. Right when the military took up something like a de facto coup, where some people described it as a de facto coup, So yesterday when the president actually gave a speech when everybody was thinking he was going to resign, he didn't resign. With all of the issues that are coming up, what do you make of it?
First of all, Kwesi, my condolences to gallant people like you, men and women of the Ink fraternity. Unfortunately, we lost Kaba over the weekend. Ecosystem was a program I was featured on quite often. It goes to the heart of the debate that who takes care of the welfare of journalists. You have issues with remuneration, and there's so much stress in the work you do. What health, insurance packages can the GJA, GIBA, and other stakeholders ensure that would be helpful to journalists? So therefore, until the coroner comes out with the autopsy reports, we can't really tell, because he died young.
Right, that's very true, very young.
Yes, a very bubbly, charismatic, and friendly gentleman. So heartfelt condolences to his family and those of you who are serving in that great capacity. Kwesi, the Zimbabweans are in a catch-22 situation.
Catch-22?
Yes. This man has to leave. How he leaves is now the question. Because it's not easy to have been a liberation fighter. And people have tried to draw parallels between Mugabe and Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela is still celebrated, even posthumously, since his death. Why? He struggled for independence for his country away from apartheid. After 27 years in prison, he did one term and said goodbye to the presidency. But Mugabe, since '98, before I was born, he's been president for 37 years. So people are thinking he's overstayed his welcome. And it is always best when you leave the stage while the applause is loudest. But I would hold brief for Mugabe. Nelson Mandela did not fight from the trenches to fight against apartheid. This guy sacrificed his life for Zimbabwe. So for a freedom fighter like this, who was a cornerstone of the independence of Rhodesia at that time, from the lopsided advantage that was given to the British that were living in the country. Farmlands were given to white folks while the blacks, were living in utter abject poverty or penury. So therefore, I believe he's a hero and not a villain. So therefore, he's someone we should chaperone out of the political scene in a very dignified and humane way. That is where I see it's difficult for them.
He talked about the Constitution yesterday as the people of Zimbabwe respecting the Constitution and not taking up arms. Are we going to see something like that? That people are going to take up arms if he...
Whether there is an accusation that the elections he has won over time are rigged, he's a legitimate leader of the country. Zimbabwe goes to the polls next year. Why the rush? Why are we hastening to shove him off? So therefore, I believe fundamentally he's the legitimate and constitutional leader of the country.
Do you foresee anything like a civil war if he's forced out? Because the perception now is that within at least the next 3 weeks, for example, when ZANU-PF goes for the Congress, which he says he will preside over, there will be some forceful activity of pushing him out.
Many of those who are saying he should leave the scene were not in the trenches with him. So I think it should be done in a dignified way. Given ultimata, it's not the best way to go. Why do you give the founder of a country a deadline to leave the political scene? You don't do that. It is not courteous and it's not dignifying. So therefore, he's 93 and frail. People go on retirement at 60, but he's 33 years older than someone who should be on retirement. So he's frail, he's demented, we understand that. But I believe if you want to take him off the political scene, it should be done in a dignified way.
They should wait for elections.
Yeah, so they should forget the deadlines.
Let's come to Kenya now. In the situation of Kenya, Odinga had before the ruling this morning stated that he will not accept if he went in favor of Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, lo and behold, this morning, the Supreme Court's ruling actually went in favor of Uhuru Kenyatta. What are we expecting? You being a security expert, do we foresee anything?
I have operations in East Africa.
Right.
And when I go to Kenya, what the Kenyan people tell me is that there is a lot of ethnicity that is, militating against the progress of the country. People who don't belong to Uhuru Kenyatta's, tribe don't get the opportunity to work in government offices. They told me this in Nairobi. So therefore, it casts a slur on the legitimacy and, so to speak, the participation for every ethnic group or people of other affiliations in the country. So there are deep-seated problems. And these deep-seated problems will only, increase the challenges Uhuru Kenyatta will face in his second term. But fundamentally, Raila Odinga is taking too much of an intransigent position. The Supreme Court was good to you.
Right.
You had some evidence.
In the first
and then they quashed
ruling
the outcome of the election. You were given another opportunity to have a shot at the presidency. Then you withdrew. So therefore, it's just like Dramani Mahama, His Excellency, our former president. He can't act as president now. So for Raila Odinga to be coming from outside the country and there is pomp and pageantry, he's not president. He's not been elected president.
So he should accept the ruling of the court?
He should accept. He should wake up and, smell the coffee that, yes, this is a closure to this political impasse. And possibly, if he's still strong, after the second term of Uhuru Kenyatta, he could throw his hat into the ring a third time.
But you're not foreseeing anything like a civil war?
60 people have died already.
Yes.
I don't know.
Uprisings in the tribal line of Odinga, as we have stated, that we are reading, that because they are divided on tribal lines, we are seeing a lot of uprisings. And this morning, even just this morning.
I'm concerned about the warm embrace Raila is receiving from the international community. He travels to the U.S. at will. What is the interest of the U.S., for example, in East Africa? But if there is sincerity on the part of the powers that be, there will be a lot of, marginalization in the country. The country will be polarized, but I don't foresee any civil war or the quantum of bloodshed we saw
briefly,
in
2008. we have some of these situations also in Togo. You are a security expert. Let me ask you on that one also.
Commendation to our president, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. I think about a fortnight ago, he revealed that he has been undertaking stealthy or clandestine, negotiations, and FOR has actually traveled to Ghana a couple of times. So therefore, the Togolese people think after half a century of the IRBAD lording themselves over them, they need change. But the change has to be democratic. That's
always a problem. The process of the change is where...
Exactly. Everybody can shout from rooftops that we want change, but how do you want to effect the change? It has to be democratic. And that is what we will stick to all the time and call on all the feuding factions to see reason in sitting around the negotiating table and to reach a common ground in seeing the way forward.
Finally, any predictions in Togo? Are we going to see Adama resign or anything at all?
FOR may not resign, and I think it's business as usual for FOR.
For Nyasimbe, I mean.
Yes, it's business as usual. You are right. He's the sort of, the family name is Adama. So it's business as usual. Earlier today, he was inspecting some police stations and all that. So I think we can heave a sigh of relief, because everybody knows that anything that happens in Togo will have a ripple effect in Ghana. So therefore, I believe the Togolese crisis is inching closer and closer to an end, a reasonable closure. But I believe all the time we should dignify our leaders, and there can be only one path to change, and that path should be democratic.
I was just about rounding up, but let me ask you this. Some people have suggested that our president, the AU chairperson, or all the leaders of the AU should be active enough to be taking actions in some of these situations. But we are not seeing them talk. We are not seeing them take actions. We are not seeing anything at all.
How can the AU talk when it took the Chinese to gift a headquarters for us? How can ECOWAS talk when ECOWAS gets subventions from Western countries? How can SADC speak on the Zimbabwean crisis when it can't take care of itself? So therefore, the ideals Nkrumah stood for, that we needed a standby force, we needed a central bank, and those things Colonel Gaddafi was talking about. Any loss of a Pan-African leader on the continent is a loss to the Pan-African enterprise. We've lost Gaddafi, lost Yahya Jammeh, soon we'll be losing Mugabe. So therefore, before we can throw our weight about, a 54-nation continent with no permanent seat at the UN Security Council, for example, when Europe, a tiny continent has got up to 2 slots. So these are some of the historical wrongs that needs to be righted. But before then, I believe blocks like ECOWAS, SADC, ICAS, IGAD, and then the AU should be able to stamp their authority, give us some economic and political emancipation and independence. Then we'll be able to talk as co-equals with our Western partners.
Thank you very much, IBRAHIM.
You're most welcome.
IBRAHIM is a security expert and has graced our studios this morning to talk about the happenings in Zimbabwe, in Kenya, in Togo, and on the whole of the African continent, how conscious we have to be regarding security and how some of these fallouts may come out with.